afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Assembly Budget and Finance Committee meeting. And I'd like to start with introductions, and we'll start at this end.
Samantha Chapman, Internal Audit, or
Rose Foley, Assembly Budget Analyst.
Lance Wilbur, Office of Management and Budget.
All third, Deputy Mr. Manager. Dan Moore, Treasurer.
Albie Gray Jackson.
Dick Training.
Jim Steve.
Forrest Dunbar.
John Weddleton.
Suzanne Fleetgreen.
Thank you. Okay, MOA financial status. I was told that Mr. Harris will not be joining us this afternoon. So we'll move on to update on 2016 budget. Mr. Wilbur. Let me back up for a moment, excuse me. I think Mr. Moore may have something he'd like to present to us.
I
Thank
do.
you, sorry about that.
Okay, so on the revenues for 2016, 2016 ended up being a really significantly negative year in terms of revenues, and it was something where a number of things just kept happening and they kept coming to us in a negative fashion. So a lot of this we didn't have control over, we couldn't have fully predicted, and usually in years there's sort of good and bad. This year it was kind of almost all bad news. Okay, so in total for general government, for the 100 funds, the number in terms of a revenue shortfall is about $11 million. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read off the top 10 so you kind of know what makes that up. And this explains literally like 98% of that $11 million figure. So the number one reason for the variance in revenues was the cut to PFD. That ended up being a $1.9 million shortfall. And that directly affected the police department in terms of collection of their delinquent fines. So that's number one, the PFD cut and how it affected APD. Number two is there was a property tax variance, and we actually knew about this early on, so it's been informed, the Assembly's been informed about it for the last 6 months. But it was mostly in real property. There was a calculation error, and also there was a major charitable exemption property that was added. So the dollar amount of that variance for property taxes is both real property and personal property combined. The net negative variance is $1.8 million. So those are the top two, the PFD and property tax. In addition, there's a year-end adjustment that's made to property taxes each year in March, and we just learned that in the last couple days. That year-end adjustment is called the Deferred Property Tax Adjustment. It's required to be done for the CAFR, and the Controller Division does that based on their analysis. That was a $1.3 million negative revenue adjustment. So that is the top three. And then if we keep going here, the next is cash pool earnings. That one is, we talked about this the last few meetings. The actual hard income, the interest earnings were pretty much on budget, but it was the unrealized earnings, which are a reflection of what the market value was at December 31st last year. Those unrealized earnings resulted in a net overall loss for the cash pool earnings of $1 million. And that, I think, was pointed out by Assemblymember Weddleton, is it will work itself out. It's more of a timing issue than it is a real like permanent loss. But nonetheless, it's $1 million shortfall for 2016. Next on the list is other APD fine revenue. That included DUI and property sales, as well as I think there was a little bit of traffic in there. They actually did pretty well on traffic this year, but that was $1 million of additional shortfall with APD's revenue budget. Next is room tax. The industry for tourism was down 4% in 2016, and that amounted to an $800,000 shortfall just for the general government portion of room tax. There's also other portions that are shared with the Denina Center and also with Visit Anchorage. So that was $800,000 shortfall. Next would be the marijuana tax. The marijuana industry was not able to open hardly any stores before the end of the year, and then even then the product sold out very quickly. So there was a $700,000 budget shortfall with marijuana tax for 2016. Just a couple more here. Auto registration tax, down $600,000 from what was budgeted. Usually that's a very, very stable tax, but we believe because of the significant drop in the PFD, a lot of people may have chosen not to buy new cars, and so the typical increase that you get from registration tax due to newer vehicles was hurt by fewer newer vehicles being purchased. The last one on this list is EMS. Those are ambulance runs. That was affected by Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion imposes dollar caps in terms of what they're going to reimburse. So we did bill, but we weren't able to get fully reimbursed because of Medicaid rules. The only other one I did not mention, and it's a 100 fund, but it's its own fund, is Fund 181. That one is $1.4 million under its revenue budget for the year. That one is also consistent with what we've been telling you for a number of months, so nothing major changed there. So the things that you knew about early on were the PFD, you knew about the normal property tax variance that occurred, that we knew about months ago. You knew about Fund 181, and you knew about marijuana coming in weak. Room tax was a surprise to us. We really thought it would be a stronger second half, and it just wasn't. And then the investment pool, we could not predict exactly how the year would end. So anyway, that's the recap, and it's $11 million. I know Lance has been made aware of it along the way, but the number keeps growing. I mean, literally, even this week, it's grown with that year-end adjustment by the Controller Division. So, but this should be the final number. And what we will do is, in the next few weeks, we will provide you one of our reports that just gives you the final year on information on revenues, and then we'll start the cycle all over again in May.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Trainee.
Couple things, Dan. One, you said charitable.
Mm-hmm.
What
was-
charity was that?
I thought you might ask that question. I actually didn't have time to get the answer. Brian Robbins is out today, but I will follow up with you on
You would
that.
follow up?
Yeah.
And since you've got this written down, would you just send us the email that lists the dollar amount for all of those?
Okay, sure.
Would appreciate that.
And can you just clarify the dollar amount for?
All the revenue rejections you've told us.
Oh,
to
yeah,
come in.
absolutely.
I would just like
Yeah.
it now rather than later.
Yeah, and I could even put it in that correspondence, but that will be a few weeks. If you need it sooner, I can do it sooner.
I'd appreciate
okay,
it
I'll do
sooner.
it sooner. Yep.
We have an election cycle going
Yeah,
on, and
okay.
there's so many people
Yeah.
postulating as to why the city. And
Yeah.
I'd rather have the exact numbers
Sure.
so we can
Okay.
try and
We'll do
correct
that.
them.
We'll do that real soon for you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I like that phrase, revenue rejection.
Well, also, I didn't get to him yet, but the president announced a reduction in HUD. So I want to know how that's going to impact us.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask the same question about charitable or other things. I also asked Nancy to put together the number about the HUD projections. So hopefully, if she gets me that, I'll send that to you as well.
Appreciate that.
I'd asked her a couple days about that. I know you mentioned this before, or this has been talked to us before, but on the room tax, are we now collecting so we passed the ordinance to allow us to collect
We are,
Airbnb.
yeah.
How is that working out as sort of a total percentage? Is that coming in lower than we expected, or about the same?
No, actually, that one we have 2 quarters reported so far, and that was, and they weren't full quarter. The third quarter was a partial quarter, and then we have a full fourth quarter. Based on what we said in the summary of economic effects, we're actually ahead of what we thought it would. Not greatly, but it's, I think it was like 50,000 ahead. So I want to say it was like $200,000 over the course of the year would be the additional revenue, and we're a bit ahead of that. So it's come in well. We're not going to be short on that. Yeah. It's working out well.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Steele?
Don't we normally have these surprises? I mean, there's always surprises that come up during the course of the year. Is there any way that we can, well, we always try to build in some safety net in the budget, I suspect. But these could be real serious impacts on us. And if we continue to have them, I think economic times are going to be bad, so we're liable to have some. I hope we are thinking ahead in terms of what if.
Right, and just to respond to that, on the revenue side of the house, we actually budget as tightly as we possibly can. And what we do is when we provide information to OMB, because they're going to be working on the 2017 budget, the revision, we actually let them know what we think the revised number should be based on how the prior year end ended up. So we continually kind of correct and try
Adjust
to
as
keep
you
it
go.
tight. So there's not a lot of room for plus or minus. And in the last few years, if you were to look at a graph, we're like spot on.
Yeah.
And we monitored every single month with the exec group, but certain things just started cratering on us, and we just didn't expect it or couldn't control it. So yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll be surprised and we'll have excess. And everybody will be happy.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Middleton?
So maybe refresh my memory, what is this real property tax miscalculation?
The assessors group, they have some very large, complicated tables that they do, and there was a formula that picked up, I believe, I don't know if it's the wrong base value or the wrong mill rate. There was some formula where it was not computing correctly, and so the numbers they gave OMB to set the mill rate ended up being incorrect. It was an error, and with that, I think that was about I want to say $800,000 impact. It was significant, and unfortunately, with real property tax, it's a one-shot deal. So whatever numbers are given to OMB, and then we send out the bills. It's like we can't fix it, we can't undo it, or go bill for the missing money. It just we're stuck with it.
Oh,
So
so we basically underbilled?
yes.
Oh, so everybody got a property tax cut?
That it effectively is that. Yeah.
I didn't get.
So I thought you said 1.8 million?
Excuse me.
1.8 million.
It was 1.8 million total. About 800,000 of that was just the error, the mathematical error in the numbers that they pulled from their tables.
So we did do property
So
tax.
what was the other?
What's that?
You said that.
The other was the charity.
Yeah, there was a significant charitable organization. I just don't know off the top of my head, but that was not captured when they set the base. And so once they put it on as charitable, it ends up being a shortfall on revenue.
For the record, we have Zig online, correct? Zig?
Yes, hello.
Hi. Anything else, Mr. Middleton?
No, that's good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
So, the state Senate yesterday or the day before passed a bill that effectively capped BFD at $1,000.
Right. Yeah, and what we asked OMB to assume is a continuation of $1,000.
Okay, so that's the assumption
Yes,
for next
yes.
year
Yeah.
going forward.
Mhm.
Now, the state house version looks like it's 1,400 or 1,600. So, if we project it at 1,000 and it comes in at 1,500,
Yeah,
then
that'd
we
be-
will actually have a bank.
That would be
year.
more money. Yeah, that would be good if they did that. But it just depends. We're conservative. We just assumed it was safe to just $1,000 because that's a lot of the bottom line that we've been hearing about. So,
Good.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're down actually $10 million real money and $1 million is paper loss.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, and you didn't mention cigarette tax. Where did that?
That came right on budget. And we actually thought for a while there it might come over budget, like be a surplus. But then a major distributor submitted paperwork and showed us that they were due a refund. So, again, it kind of worked against us. We thought it actually might help some of these other issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So, Mr. Moore, you mentioned the room tax and how 800,000 was general government. So in other words, it was a $2.4
Yeah,
million
it was-
loss?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Wilbur?
Well, now you know what I have to work with.
I know.
So let's talk about 2016. I'm actually going to start you off with some good news. As you remember, the departments, we asked them to save 0.5% in 2016, which is about $2.5 million. Overall, for all departments, they actually saved a lot more than that, 2% for a total budget. So they came in underspent at about $8.5 to $8.8 million underspent. Now, a lot of that has to do in a couple main departments. We were, our last year we didn't have as much snow and a variety of other things as we have. We also had a couple of departments, internal audit, CFO, ER, IT, and a couple of departments that really did a great job. Public Works admin, they really came in. So, in spite of, we have one department that you're aware of and they're managing theirs, overall, general government did a great job coming in. that helps us sort of offset the dampening of the surprise that we have, but it still puts us in a little bit of negative space, so we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna work that. But overall, the departments really did a good job in 2016, and that's as an information that we got this week, and as the year closes, we'll know a little bit more. So that's where 2016 ended up as a group, and then we'll provide a more detailed report that you can kind of see where those departments ended up in the next couple weeks or several weeks. So that's where we ended up in 2016. How we balance that gap between our revenues and our expenditures. We're still working internally to figure out how we're going to make that happen. So, 2% savings on $500 million. That's really, really good, I think, in the department. So for 2017, I'll start with the revenues. We did receive some, as for 2017, we are working on revisions to our 2017 budget. Our plan will be to introduce that to the Assembly on April 11th. So I'll be working with Rose to get a work session together on how, after we get that piece, we're really working diligently to bring you a balanced budget with the new information from revenues and the new projections from revenues. That is really a difficult thing based on our 2017 group revenues. Based on the reductions in the room tax, we've got some information from that. In total, our revenue projections for 2017 is about $3 million, $2.5 to $3 million under what we had budgeted. So that's revenue that we will be reducing from our 2017 budget, and we'll have to figure out how we will do that. We've also asked departments what their needs might be related to things that we need to cover that we weren't aware of in November when we approved the budget. Departments, except for 4 or 5 key items, and those are going to be things that we had contractual obligations or lease payments. We recognize that we probably will have some additional litigation costs. We know that we're going to have a slight increase on some medical contributions that we didn't expect in November. We're going to have to modify some of those things. And then we'll probably have a slight adjustment in our utilities. But pretty much as far as additional services coming into the municipality, we don't see any of those. With the conservative numbers that Dan has given us on the revenues, we are going to be I would be surprised if we are not going to be making reductions for the services that we have in 2017 to accommodate those things. What they are, I do not know. I'm putting together with some proposals for the administration and working with the executive managers, because we do have to produce a balanced budget. And one of the reasons I think it's important that we do this is that 2018 is not going to be any easier. So we need to prepare, we need to set ourselves up for a balanced 2017 1Q as we move into 2018. So if the revenues take another adjustment in the wrong direction, we're prepared with enough time to make those adjustments. And so we've been letting the managers know to be thinking about that. We're not asking for any decisions, but want to get them sort of in a frame of mind. And again, Madam Chair, this is a conservative perspective as it relates to the revenue side, and we don't want to sort of overextend what we can pay for based on revenues that we don't have or we don't have in set. We do not have any more fund balance to work with to make these adjustments. So the combinations of projects that we thought we might be able to do, we might have to delay those for another year and set those up for another time. But I think those are sort of the high things, and recognizing that the information that we get from Dan and recognizing where we are. The benefit is, we're really just finishing up the first quarter of 2017. So we have some time to adjust and react, which is a good thing. So that's where we are right now. Again, the first quarter revisions for 2017 will be an addendum to the agenda, probably on your April 11th meeting, and then the Assembly will be looking forward for action 2 weeks later. That will allow us to include whatever the bond, the O&M increments of the bonds, we can add that in and make sure that we have all of those pieces put together. So I think those are the highlights that I have for 2017 and where we ended up in 2016. So if you have any questions,
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Mr. Training.
And fire department overtime, how are we looking there?
So I haven't looked at them specifically. I met with the chief earlier in the month, and so far I think they're actually doing very, very well. Typically, traditionally their overtime has been in the second and really third quarter. First quarter, I think they're doing well. And just as a quick look from municipality-wide, going through the end of February, we're underspent in our labor right now. We've got a lot of sort of pre-encumbrances for contracts and things that we normally do for non-labor, but that's a good sign too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Dunbar?
So the state senate again is proposing at the moment a 5% cut to the BSA. And speaking with Tamagotchi Geisler, that's going to be a very large hit to their budget. How might that reverberate to the municipality's budget? Are we going to have to fill any gaps for them? I mean, things like, safety officers or things that we might be subsidizing them with, snow plowing, whatever it is. I don't think we can pay for teachers.
Actually, we haven't sort of approached the school district to come up with a plan on that, just based on the recent commission legislature. What we are planning right now in 2017 for our relationship of our budget to school district budget is the budget that they propose to you. If they make any adjustments, then we will make some adjustments if we can make those adjustments. So, I mean, we've been working together as we prepared ours and they prepared theirs, so we take those assumptions. The legislature does something on Wednesday night after an action on Tuesday. We don't immediately react. We're going to kind of wait until how it all shows out.
I mean, I
Thank
think,
you, Mr. Dunbar.
through the chair, we're looking at things, one of you brought up at the joint school board meeting, as we move, as we move forward with our transit revisioning and we get 15-minute bus service into Snake Ridge, are there potential savings for ASD? Everything we're working on with shared services, with your guys' support, will, at least in the first year, save ASD a little bit more money than it saves the MOA. I think those are the areas where we, just through policy changes, can help them.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you mentioned that the fund balance has been totally used.
Thank you. The unrestricted fund balance, that's the part that we don't have. Normally we had some unrestricted, so meeting our 10 and our 2, the availability for unrestricted fund balance, that's the part that I was referring to.
All right. So, I mean, I thought we had $15 million fund balance last year, and that's totally been.
So we had 15 million when we started 2016, at the end of 15. We used, I think, about 4 million of that in supplementals through 2016. We used almost 9 million of it when we built the 2017 budget. And we also had some additional supplementals as we went through. So we basically consumed all of that.
We also put it into the settlement, right? Instead of,
Yeah, we also,
include the settlement.
we used the remainder of that and then we dipped into our reserves. We have the 10 and the 2. The 2% is emergencies, so we were able to tap into that. And that was really good.
Suzanne is shaking her head.
I
These
don't
different
believe that we
money.
used the fund, well, we used it for the Akutna settlement, but when we set the mill rate next year, that will be recovered.
All right, that's what.
That's exactly right. That gives you that.
17. For the 17 mill rate, we will recover that and the money will go back.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, just as a note, I'm worried about education budget just nationally. They're liable to take a big hit as well, and so it worries me if we're working on the edge in terms of reserves. I don't want to cut into the meat of the municipality. Right now, we're working fairly optimistically in terms of the projects, as you said, out and about to continue to have projects so that our small businesses don't get hurt. We start a downturn or recession that could snowball. And I'm also worried about the employees in terms of, it's fine to make cuts and to come in and be successful in terms of this last year, but you can't keep doing that year in and year out. You can't keep expecting. Pretty soon you're starting to cut into the meat. And so I think think we're gonna have to be a little creative in trying to find some additional revenues. And in terms of projects, we might not be able to do as many, but we have to keep investing as far as I'm concerned, or we're gonna hurt the community as well.
Shot to it, Madam Chair. I would believe that we, the administration has challenged everybody, including the Budget Advisory Commission, on, new opportunities, new ideas for revenues, not
Makes
just in
sense.
addition. I mean, it's gonna be done in a couple ways. We are gonna be looking at those new revenues. I know the Assembly's looked at a couple opportunities, and maybe more different ones will come up. But on the other side, Mr. Steele, the reality is that we are gonna have to be looking at some of where we get some, where we refine the business that we do and the programs that we provide, because that's what we're going to have to do, and those are going to be choices that we're going to make with departments and with the administration and with the Assembly.
The cuts that are being made to the university worry me tremendously. The cuts that are being made to education and the potential with the new education secretary at the federal level worry me a lot. So we're isolated to a certain extent, but when they start making cuts nationally, we're still part of it. So watch out.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Trainee?
And if the state cuts the BSA, right now, I think we give the school district $209 million approximately a year. That would reduce what we can legally give them if the state does in fact cut the BSA down. We just need to know where that's heading as soon as you find out. And I would like to see what we can do to help education without running afoul of the state law. And if we can use it through people transportation, that's fine. I want to see how we can help education. Because I'm concerned we've got a secretary that doesn't value public education. We've got a state senate that doesn't value it. Get concerned about it. And if you could work on a comic book tax for me, I'd appreciate it. I see nobody that would fight
I
that.
haven't heard that one.
Only kidding, John. I just thought I'd bring it up.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Okay, no other questions? Mr. Steele?
The legislature, state legislature, is looking for ways to shift costs from the state to the local level. And so we're going to see a bunch of that too come out of the state because they're trying to take an easy way.
Shift and shaft.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Next item on the agenda is a report from the Budget Advisory Commission, and Ms. Nelson is in Hawaii, so she won't be here today. Okay, discussion on spending limitation. I thought that we would add this topic on every agenda until we make some decisions on how we want to go. So,
Maybe if I could start.
I want you to.
Sure,
Thank
great.
you.
So, Madam Chair, I know that we talked about kind of the challenges that we have here, and what I would propose that we do is, OMB is really focused on 1Q right now. Our plan would be, once we get that done and presented to you, we're going to put together sort of a proposed calculation formula. The things that we talked about last week, which would be adjustments to the medical, adjustments to, how we might calculate it for population and CPI and new construction, a variety of those things. So our plan would be to put that together for you and present it to you, and really spend some time doing that after we get this first quarter budget. It's really sort of consuming most of our resources right now. Looking forward to doing that in early April, and then working with the Budget Advisory Commission as well. So that's our general schedule and our approach, if that would be okay with the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay, and so, Mr. Weddleton.
I don't know if this is right now, but some of us saw last night, I believe out of the 14 or 15 candidates for assembly, there might be 2 who understand tax cap or spending cap or limit. Are you allowed to send a little thing to all of them? Because what they do is they talk about it in totally unusual ways, and the audience is going, wow, I had no idea. They're reading it up. So they're getting fed this information from candidates. Can you send little info bits to candidates and say, oh, by the way?
Yeah. I mean, and in the past, we've had candidates who are running, reach out to OMB and ask for sort of a briefing on the budget. We haven't had that benefit yet, but ask Mr. Weldon, we can do that. And how the mechanism that makes it available and making it simple.
He just said, in the charter, in order to something, there's no clue.
It wasn't just the candidates, it was also the moderator didn't understand it last night either.
And I have a comment on that request, and it's just my opinion, okay? But But Mr. Wilbur's right, when folks run for office, usually they approach OMB, and I really don't know if it's really appropriate for OMB to reach out to candidates and provide them information. I just don't know it, and I don't think it is, but that's my opinion. Anyway, Ms.
Madam Chair, if you were interested, we could put it on the Budget Finance Committee's webpage as an item of the minutes, maybe as a way to put that out there for the public, and people could be referred there.
Right, I really like that suggestion, better than, reaching out to candidates and providing them information that they should be asking for. So if nobody has any objection, could we do it, use that approach, Ms. Lee Green? Okay. Mr. Wilbur?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Wilbur.
that would make me feel a lot better. Yeah, because I've had folks reach out to me for budget information. I wasn't gonna, anyway, okay. So did you say that you're not gonna have a document ready in regards to the spending limitation until after first quarter?
That would be our preference.
Okay.
I mean, we're working on it right now, but our time to then to illustrate it, explain it, and then follow up, we'd like to be able to do that after we get the budget in.
Okay, which makes sense, I'm not gonna be a sitting assembly member then, and I really want it to be, but that's okay. But my question is, are you seriously considering the medical CPI?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
That
Yeah, we
was
have to have
Dunbar
some suggestions
suggested,
for
and I
that.
agreed with him at the last meeting. I think that is a tremendous.
I mean, that will be in the piece that we put together, and if through the Budget Advisory Commission and the Assembly, you guys and the administration would work out something different, but that'll get you started.
That's a good idea.
And I would
Mr.
just
Green?
add, certainly, if assembly members want to move forward earlier than that, I would encourage any of you to reach out to your new assembly attorney or Mr. Halsey and start drafting potential changes.
Thank you, that's a really good idea. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the spending limitation? Right, Mr. Theron, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of these days, I'm going to leave with good news as I get up here.
Today's not that day.
Today's not
Today's not that day.
That's why we say
not
we're
operational
last.
running
We're
right
not
now?
operational yet, we're working towards it. We're now about 2.5 weeks behind where we had hoped to start what was referred to as our system integration test 2. One of that was supposed to be the 27th of February, and we are not able to start yet. We are the area that is behind schedule is our data conversion, and we've talked about this in the past. This is converting the PeopleSoft data and, more importantly, the non-PeopleSoft data into the SAP format. As of yesterday, we are 83% of the way complete. However, there's still that other 17% that we have to be able to accomplish. And it's taken us longer than we anticipated. Many of the employees on the municipality are have worked 6-7 straight weekends in a row to be able to work on these type of things. Grants was a large challenge for us. We had the person in that department leave. We had new people who tried to pick up. A lot of work to be able to done there. Projects, when we start tying the grants to the utilities and all the other projects, it's taken us a long time. Assets has taken us quite a bit of time. As a result of that, we're just about ready, I think today, hopefully or tomorrow, we're kicking off the transactional data, which is the last 10 files that make up a large portion of this. But a lot of the work over the last several weeks has been taking our master data, which is really our core data on the system, and either redoing it, updating it. Many, if not all, the subject matter experts from the municipality have never gotten this far on the project, so a lot of these data conversions and so forth have never been done before, and it's taken a long time. If I could remind you, about 50% of the data that we have to move into SAP does not reside in PeopleSoft because it's been 16, 17 years since that system's been upgraded. So a lot of those files were done in Excel, Access, and all those kind of things, and those things need to be loaded. Well, when a municipal employee did their little piece in an Excel spreadsheet, somebody in a utility or whatever could do their little piece in the spreadsheet, but they never talked to each other and had to make sure that the two spreadsheets matched up. Well, that's what we're trying to do now, is we're trying to load into our system the things, and we're finding a whole bunch of integration points that we've had to spend a lot more time going through to make sure we're validating. As I've stated several times, SIT2 is, in my opinion, the most important because we're loading all of our data, including transactional, adding security to it, and we're running budgets, and we're literally validating and vetting everything. So it's really critical to have our numbers match up because we have to do them at some point before we go live. We've got to do it. So unfortunately, we're taking the time now. It will certainly mean that downstream we will not have to reinvent this, but we've had a delay in getting the data finalized, and it's caused us the 2.5 weeks right now. Unfortunately, from where I'm projecting, it's going to be a couple more weeks before we can get all the data loaded. It is important for this data on an HR side because this is the data that we're using to go in when we do our parallel payroll tests in SIT3. We're using this data, so we're almost at wanting 100% accuracy on that to be able to validate that information. The data that has been loaded right now has a 99.98% success rate. So the data that we put into the system is about as good as you can get, but it's taking an extensive amount of time with the minimal resources that we have that are trying to do CAFR, trying to do first quarter budget, and trying to do all this work. And it's taking us a lot of time to be able to do this. We have taken this time to try to get caught up a little bit on reports and our ECM, which were a couple of work streams that were behind schedule a little bit. So we've been able to make some progress in those particular areas. So that's a good thing. We needed to do that at some point in time, but we're still a couple of weeks away, I think, from beginning SIT2. We've taken a very strong stance that, and I think the functional steering committee has recommended this as well, that we want to go into the next phase of testing ready. But to the detriment of the timeline and the schedule, unfortunately, it's taking longer than we had anticipated at this point in time.
Mr. Training.
Are we going to have to convert the Excel and Access into PeopleSoft and then take that into SAP, or are we going to take Excel and Access directly into SAP?
That's correct. So the second option. Now, the Excel will not go into PeopleSoft and then in SAP. They're taking the Excel directly right into SAP and so forth. And all of these things that we're talking about, grants, projects, assets, those are all outside of PeopleSoft. So those are the ones that have been taking a long period of time. And then on our ER side, they've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to make sure every single employee's pay and schedules and so forth are there. We had I think if you remember, we went into SIT1 with scrambled data, and that caused us a challenge as well because while the system worked and everything came out, we were unable to validate the actual employees. So now we're actually validating, and that has caused a whole bunch of other things that we didn't see before, and we've been working through those particular issues as well. HCM will be finished today or tomorrow morning, so that whole side of the equation will be locked down, and then it'll all be the finance and logistics side that we still have to finish. And all the master data is pretty much done, but it's taken many more weeks than we expected, so we're just about ready to enter loading the budgets and going and putting in the transactional balance, which is a lot of the trial balances and all those kind of things from different years.
So we have 3 or 4 items coming up at our next assembly meeting, SAP related.
Yes, Mr. Trini, thank you for reminding. We have 5 items on the consent agenda on next Tuesday, as well as the public testimony after that for the funding of those particular change requests.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Training. Mr. Weddleton.
So you're getting data in from all these spreadsheets, so you're just kind of probably manually doing it or something? So if you do it now, then you get it all in for your testing in 4 to 6 weeks, well, then you have to bring in updated.
So when you do, let's say, take master data, for example, let's take grants. Initially when we loaded SIT1, the debt grants file that was given to us in October had about 118 grants in it. So it worked for the purposes of SIT1 to see if our system was working, but we didn't have the other 180 grants that needed to be in there. So they were working on preparing those grants because we have approximately 300 grants that need to be input, and then but it's not just inputting them, it's tying them to everything across the entire landscape because employees are paid from grants, projects are paid from grants, all of these kind of things, and that integration to make sure that the person who's doing grants was talking to these other 12 people and how they impacted all their things. And when we're loading them into the system, we need to make sure that every column, every field has the appropriate tie-in to whatever they're loading on their side for their project. And that has caused a tremendous amount of validation. So our municipal employees have to pre-validate, post-validate, so they're going back and forth, making sure that the file they're loading has all the bits and pieces, but then somebody else is loading a totally different one, and it has to tie. Because when we run these test scripts and so forth, we have expected balances. Remember, we're running FERC at this time as well, so that's at the lowest level after we've driven all these things down. In order for those to be able to balance, you have to have all the bits and pieces to be able to get to that particular point. So it's the tie-in, but yes, all these Excel spreadsheets are loaded by back office, which is the company that's SAP contracted to do this, into their system, and then they load it into the SAP environment that is then the test scripts are run against.
But if you load them now, you have several months to update them.
So you're correct. We're going to be accurate as of the day that we load it, and then it is the municipal responsibility. When we start preparing SIP 3 data, probably in 6-7 weeks, they take their existing file that we just loaded, and then they update it for additions, changes, or whatever. The municipal employees have to keep that on all the way through user acceptance testing, and then eventually cut over. And when we do cut over, it's as of that point in time, everything moves in.
So you do a dual system at some point. They're keeping their spreadsheets updated, but they're also adding them into SAP.
Well, they're keeping the spreadsheets and then they'll load, and then once we do cut over and load in SAP, then the spreadsheets go away, and everything resides in SAP at that point in time.
Excuse me, one moment. I need to go to another meeting, so I'm going to hand Bill over to training. And this is my last meeting. It's been an honor. Bye.
Like the ministry, like we were joined by the mayor. Mr. Steele, you're next.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but think how great it's going to be when it's done. If you do all that, if you make sure everything's accurate when you put it in there, it's up to date, when you start running, it's going to seem like, boy, this is heaven. Hopefully
certainly
you'll get to that
mitigate the
point.
issues at that point in time rather than having.
Well, you'll be able to recuperate with those feelings, certainly, but it's a lot of work.
And if we remind you, data is our responsibility. It's been a mini responsibility from day one. We've got a vendor that gets it into SAP, but our accuracy, the quality, all of those kind of things, that is ultimately our responsibility to make sure.
So you guys take the air report and work through it.
When all these validations that they're doing is where, when I say validation, that's the subject matter expert in a specific area going, give me a file to begin with. They say it's good. They load it, and then it errors out. So then it goes back to the particular person and said, here's the 12 errors. What's going on? Then that person has to go in there and find out what those 12 errors are, and then they fix it, then they load it. But what ends up happening is that file may be good, and then 3 files down, somebody else loaded something completely different, that then made what was done before by that person not right, because they didn't know that was going to be happening. So we're constantly going back and forth and refining the information across these files because of that integration that I was referring to.
This is where the term garbage in, garbage out comes home to roost. So you're doing it right.
But it's unfortunately adding to our schedule.
Any other comments from some members? Mr. Mayor, anything you want to add to this discussion on SAP? Okay. Other comments from administration? If not, we're done. Thanks for being here.